Riding through a ghost town, y'all ain't playing my sounds. Don't tell me to calm down, don't tell me to calm down. Only time I go backwards is when I wanna moonwalk. Don't test me, my mood's wrong. Don't test me, my mood's wrong. We are who we say that we are. You were lost in the stars, and it's all from the start. Never running no pace, never on the right page, but we still read that book, and we still run that race. Mississippi Racer riding out, no shortcuts, no time for that. Mississippi Racer riding out, till the wheels fall off, I'm driving that. Mississippi Racer riding out, wheels stop burning, strike the match. Mississippi Racer riding out, red light, green light, red light, good night. Hey, red light, green light, red light, good night. 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 Time to chill, don't sweat it.
Good morning and welcome. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show powered by Wire to Wire Network. I am Chris, and that over there, that is Mo. Mo, happy Tuesday, sir.
Happy Tuesday to you and everybody out there listening.
Mo, I got a question for you. Let's say that one of your children decided they were going to start a business, okay? And you being the great dad that you were like, listen, I'm going to give you a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit. We got to get you started. You're going to need some supplies. You're going to need some overhead. Like, you don't got it all right now, but I love your idea. Your idea is great. I know you're going to be a hard worker, so I'll get you off the ground. And then I know your idea is going to take off and you're going to do your thing. And this is going to be great in a little bit of time. And then we fast forward like 20 years. And Mo, you're still bankrolling the business. The business has never turned a profit. She's super passionate about it. She loves her business. You still love her business. But you're still bankrolling the business. The business has never made money. Is it still a business, Mo? Or is it more like Mo's charity at this point because the business just keeps losing money every year?
Well, if it's just losing money every year and you're just putting money into it, it's starting to feel more like an allowance, right? That's how I would see it.
Mo, this is 2024. The WNBA is going to lose $50 million this year. And they've never made a profit one time. Not once. I'm not going to sit here and go as far as to say that the WNBA is a charity. But the WNBA is certainly not a good business model. They have Caitlin Clark, who dominates every single headline you look at right now. The WNBA's attendance numbers are up across the board. The WNBA is getting talked about more in 2024 than they have ever been talked about in their history. And I'm including their first year of existence when they were that idea, right? They were that great idea that everybody was excited about, that people wanted to get on board with. Fast forward nearly 25 years, Mo, and they've never made $1. But yet you look at people who play in the WNBA and you look at people who support women's athletics and they say things like, if LeBron makes this, they should make this. Mo, the NBA is profitable. The NBA makes money. The NBA pays their players. They pay their players because they make money. Mo, I don't know another world where a business 25 years in that's never made a penny still exists. I don't know what that business looks like. I guess the WNBA is that business. The WNBA is literally being supported and carried by the NBA. If not for the NBA, where else are they getting their money from? Because they can barely keep the lights on, Mo. But yet we keep having these conversations week after week now because of Caitlin Clark and because of the popularity of the sport in 2024. Before we'd had these conversations like every 6 months. Every 6 months, something will pop up with women's athletics. Oh, they should make this or they should make that. Mo, if my company wasn't profitable, I'd be flying coach too. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, if we're not making money, of course we're flying coach. We can't afford to charter we can't afford charter planes right now, Mo. We're not making money. So,
Well,
but
that's
yeah,
for the NBA.
right. But here we are, and I'm not trying to downplay or criticize the women of the WNBA because they are tremendous athletes. And I do feel they should maximize their opportunity to make money to the best of their ability. But at the end of the day, what conversation are we really having when you're playing in a league that has never once been profitable? And if that's the conversation we're having, how can you ask for more money? How can you say, we're only making a percentage of what we should be making? Where's the money coming from? Because the more we pay you, the further in debt the league goes, essentially, Mo. Am I wrong?
No, I get where the conversation is, and you bring up a great point. On talent and on the product on the court, these athletes deserve to be paid more. I don't disagree with that for one moment. But if you're in a struggling league and you're not making a profit overall in the bigger picture, how do I give you a raise? How do I justify giving you a raise? Even though you're a terrific talent, we're in the red. We're being carried to a degree, like you said, by the NBA. I can't give you $1 million contract. We can't do the comparisons. If LeBron James makes this much, the NBA has all the sponsors. They've got the TV contracts. They're global. Their jersey sales, their merch, the whole nine. They make millions upon millions of dollars. You can't make that comparison, that leap, like you're on the same level or the same playing field. I root for the WNBA to be a success because I know the talent is there, the product is there. But the idea that they should make as much money right now when your league as a whole is a whole, I don't see how that's viable. But do I think their future is brighter than it was before? Absolutely. But in the bigger picture, they're still struggling, right? You're still struggling to get out of the red. And like you said, if you were running a company and somebody came to you and said, "I've been here 10 years, man, and I'm been in work on time and I put in the most hours," you would agree with everything they said, and you'd go, "Yeah, but we're still in the red. I can't give you a raise. I own the place and I can't give myself any more money." You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm with you 100% on that.
And I guess the hope is this is the start of it, right? Like, I know they're going to lose $50 million this year, according to the New York Times. But I guess the hope is that this is the start of the turning point. What happens next season? Because now you're hopefully you're taking full advantage of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and all of that rookie class. Hopefully you have another great situation where you have a couple more stars come in from college next season that maybe have a little bit of name value to their names, and you just kind of keep building on the momentum that you had this year with Caitlin Clark. But Mo, no matter what next year looks like, I mean, let's say next year you cut it in half and they just lose $25 million next year. You still just lost 20. That's a lot of money to be losing. Oh, I mean, it's crazy that we're having this conversation because you don't think about these things. I think if you sat down and had an honest conversation with somebody, they'd probably be like, well, the WNBA is probably not making money hand over fist, but they're a business. Clearly, they're making something, right? No, and they never have. So I guess the hope is that maybe 2 or 3 seasons from now, maybe that might be the first opportunity where you turn the profit when you got Caitlin Clark and the rest of them in there for 3 or 4 years and you just build. Maybe you finally hit it. But man, I mean, I read the article twice, Mo. I could not believe that they've never turned a profit one time.
Yeah, honestly, you bringing up the subject, I'm not gonna lie. I thought they were a struggling entity, but if you told me that all they had done up to this point is lose money, I would have told you I had no clue. I did not know. I knew that they weren't making the money that the NBA was, not even close in that stratosphere. But if you told me they were losing millions of dollars, I honestly did not know that. I just thought they were struggling in terms of being able to pay their athletes more while they're building the league up. And to hear what you're saying and to think about how the conversation at one point was how much more money the players deserve. And again, on talent and on the product on the floor, I'm with you. But if you're the powers that be, the people who run the WNBA, the presidents, the management, and all that, you look at the books and you go, we can't do that. There's no way we can do the fact that actually the Caitlin Clark impact, the fact that they are now flying on chartered planes and stuff like that is amazing in itself when you tell me that they're losing $50 million this year.
And to be fair to the WNBA, they haven't lost millions upon millions every single year. Early on, when they were losing money and not turning a profit, they were losing a few $100,000. So I don't want anyone to think, oh my God, they've lost billions of dollars because they're losing. That's not the case. They've had years where they've been close to breaking even, a couple $100,000 here and there. But this year certainly is not one of them when they're losing $50 million this year. Let's talk about the NBA, Mo. We talked about it yesterday. We said that if the Celtics get it done, they better get it done game 5 because we don't want to have the conversation of what a game 6 would look like. Well, the Celtics got it done in game 5, and Mo, it was pretty convincing. There wasn't really a moment where you thought Dallas, outside of maybe early in the first quarter, there was never really a moment where you felt Dallas was really in the game. They were down double digits at the end of the first quarter. They never really got back into it truly in the second quarter. They're down 21 at half. They only cut that lead by 2 or 3 in the third quarter, and it was just never really there for them. Boston wins the title. I believe it's their 18th overall. Jaylen Brown is named the MVP of the finals. Let's start with that. So Jaylen Brown gets MVP. We said 3 weeks ago, if the Celtics go to the finals and they win it all, it doesn't matter if Jason Tatum is the MVP or not, because the point is they won it. I look at some of the headlines this morning, and Boston is funny. I'm not going to try not to show my bias here, Mo, but Boston is funny because some of the headlines that I saw this morning in Boston newspapers were talking about Jason Tatum leading the Boston Celtics to an NBA title. And I said to myself, well, isn't that strange? I don't know if I would have made that headline, Mo. I don't know if I would have said Jason Tatum necessarily led Boston to the NBA title. But those were some of the headlines I saw this morning. So again, it's interesting because we said that he doesn't need the MVP. He needs the championship first. He needs to get that monkey off his back. And if he wins MVP in the process, great. But he doesn't need to be the best player on the floor. If they win the title, Boston fans will be okay with that. But then, Mo, we see some of those headlines in Boston this morning, and it seems like Boston needs him to be the best player on the floor, even though he wasn't in this series.
No, he wasn't the best player in the series. I thought if you take away his shooting percentages, he played well. But he didn't play well enough to me to be the finals MVP. And maybe the headline should have read Tatum Brown lead the Celtics to a title, because it's always been about that duo, Tatum and Brown. And I thought even last night, where he actually had one of his better shooting games of the series, I still thought it was more of a team effort. Like early in the game, when it was a game, Brown and Tatum were like 2 for 9 from the field. They were that where it was teetering in the first quarter. They were held together because of what Drew Holiday did in the first quarter, what Derek White did in the first quarter. And that kind of signifies what this team is all about. You have your 2 stars, but then you have your other complementary stars around them with White, Holiday, Al Horford, and guys of that nature. And they find a way to just be the better team. We come into this series knowing we thought Boston was a better team. We thought Luka and Kyrie were the more explosive duo, but we knew the Celtics were a better team. And I thought last night coming into the game, Luke and Kyrie would both have to put on one of those games where they go for about 60 combined, and maybe have 12 assists between them. And that didn't really happen. And that was mostly because of the Celtics defense, which I thought was spearheaded by Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown. So look, a great effort by the Celtics. And look, you know how Celtics Nation is. They see things through a different lens in their eyes. Look, if you say Jason Tatum's been the best player in the Celtics for the last 5 or 6 years, he has. Has he been the best player in the Celtics throughout this season? He has. He hasn't been their best player in these playoffs. That's been Jaylen Brown. And like we talked about, if they win the title down the road, are we going to say, well, Tatum wasn't even the best player on the title? We're not going to say that. We're going to say he's a champion. He won a title. And the way they do things in Boston, the Brown-Tatum combination winning this title, those numbers, number 7 and number 0, go up in the rafters. I think a lot of people forget, like last night, again, being a lifelong Laker fan, I had no shortage of people sending me the number 18 to remind me the Celtics now have 18 titles to the Lakers 17. And I never debate that. It is a fact. Although I do have to remind them, 11 of them came in like the 50s and 60s. But okay, you got that. And here's the thing: they've won 18 titles. Do you know that Jaylen Brown is their 6th Finals MVP in the history of the Celtics? Because 11 of those titles came in the 60s. I'm just saying.
Mo, obviously, whenever you have a team that wins a championship, the talk immediately becomes, can they repeat next year? Obviously, with the NBA, it's such a hard question to ask because there's always movement in the offseason. Teams that, are on the verge, get pieces, and now become in the championship bubble. Teams that are on the verge don't get pieces, and we talk about, they missed the opportunity. Now they're probably, 4th or 5th best in their conference. Looking at Boston and the upcoming offseason and the forecasted landscape of the East, obviously Boston is going to be in the conversation next season. Do you think they're going to be one of the favorites to repeat? Or do you think that the competition in the East is going to drastically change and Boston's going to be in the conversation, but they may not be a favorite to come out of the East?
I think they should be the favorite to repeat. The scariest thing for the Eastern Conference, and any other conference for that matter, is if the Celtics go out and they add to their bench to complement what they have in their top 5, they're going to be a problem. Like they didn't have a great bench, and they did what they did. If they go out and they add to that bench to fortify what they already have, when you're looking at that starting 5, then throwing Big Al, I think the Celtics are primed to repeat. Everybody else, Chris, you know how this goes. Everybody else throughout this offseason, the rumor mill's going to kick in overdrive, right? The Sixers and the Knicks. But everybody's going to be interested in like the same 4 or 5 players, right? Top of the line players, but everybody's not going to get them. And that's what it really comes down to. And I look at the Knicks and I think about the great run that they had. I don't know if they're going to be that much better if they just run it back. I like a lot of the pieces that they have, but I feel like they're still missing a piece to get them over the hump. And before anybody says anything, that piece is not a healthy Julius Randle. The best thing you can do for Julius Randle is get him a new address. That'll be better for you and for the net in the bigger future. The bottom line is this, though. I'm looking at the Celtics, and I think everybody else is chasing them. And remember this: Tatum and Brown, what they did last night is they got the monkey off their back, Chris. They won a title. I actually think they go into next season less. How can I put this? More relaxed, right? You know what I mean? Like they've got the monkey off their back. I think now you get greedy and go, I want more. But I think you play with a confidence that maybe you didn't have before because there was a pressure there. There's always a pressure to win, but once you've already established yourself as a champion and you've been there and you've done it, I think it does change you mentally and how you approach the game. So I know there's going to be an arms race in the offseason, but I'm looking at the Sixers and the Bucks and the Knicks, who are probably the Celtics' biggest competition in the East. And I don't think any of them right now today can beat Boston unless they make some major moves and upgrade, because they all have major needs.
Well, let's get JG up in here this morning. We got Major League Baseball things to talk about, which means we got to get JG up here on the show, which means we push the JG button and boom, JG appears on the screen. JG, this morning, how are you?
Doing good. How are you guys doing this morning?
Hey, what's up, JG?
JG, always a pleasure to have you here on the show. JG, we got some fun topics to talk about this morning. Let's talk about one. Every now and then we throw some baseball purist stuff at you because I love to get your opinion. Let's talk about players and pitchers beating up the water cooler, throwing the entire thing of seeds onto the field, basically having temper tantrums in the dugout. JG, there's two sides to this. There is the baseball is an emotional game, and sometimes in those moments, you gotta channel the anger and the emotion somewhere, and you would much rather have someone throw a cooler onto the ground or onto the field than, I don't know, punch a dugout wall and break a hand or something crazy like that. We just saw a Giants pitcher have a meltdown the other night. He spiked the cooler. Last week we saw a Major League Baseball player toss the entire bucket of seeds out there onto the field because they were unhappy. Where does JG fall with these little shows, if you will, that some Major League Baseball players put on when they're not happy?
You know, this is an emotional game. There is an extent where you have to understand there's where that line is. You cannot let your emotions take the best of you. And we see this all the time. This is not new. We see this every year where somebody just has a meltdown, and they take it out, as you said, on the cooler. We can go back to David Ortiz breaking the phone in Baltimore. Again, this is something that, this is an emotional sport. Just like all sports, it's not just a baseball thing. This is an all sport type of thing. We see this in the NFL. We see this in the NBA, where guys just absolutely lose their cool and whatnot. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with, and from my own personal experiences, I had to learn it the hard way, because I had that issue where I would, if I'm in a slump or a struggle, and I would, go into the dugout and I'm knocking something over, everything like that, and you kind of go, man, like, how does this look? How's the perception of this? Because the next is, again, what we're taught in baseball is you have another day. You have the next day to come back out. And the beautiful thing about what those guys are able to do at that level is they can flush it as fast as possible. They can get rid of it and move on as quickly as they can. That's why they're at that level. Whereas guys that were in the minors or in college, they're not able to, turn that page as quick. Guys in the big leagues, they can, but there's a perception about it that's just wrong. And we see that all the time, where the manager or coaches or players or leaders go, man, you can't do that. You got to stay strong. You got to stay cool. Keep your head, because you have another opportunity coming up tomorrow, or if you're a pitcher, you have another opportunity coming up in 5 days. Be ready to go in that turn. Figure it out and learn from it. So, I don't have a problem with the emotional side, because this is an emotional game, just like all sports is. But you have the perception of what it looks like, not just to your teammates, but also to the fans too, because it depends on where you're at. Fans don't like that. The fans don't want to see you do it. They want to see you keep your cool. So the perception is the biggest thing for me about it. But again, at the same time, as a former player, I get it. I understand. And you have to. Some guys may just have to. They take 20 seconds to beat the crap out of something, and then, all right, I'm good to go now.
JG, the interesting thing about baseball is you have these prospects, and you hear about them. You're constantly hearing about, well, they're doing this down there. They're doing this down there. We can't wait to get them up here. When do we think they're going to get up here? But every now and then you have these situations, and it's kind of awkward, where, things kind of start to turn on those prospects, and the sunshines and rainbows and roses doesn't always end up being what it turns out. So we got two of those situations right now. The first one is with the Chicago Cubs. Chicago is openly exploring third base options because they are not happy with what they're seeing from Christopher Morel. He was someone that's been in their system for a minute. He is someone that they thought was going to be a big part of their future on this team. And they're currently saying, we're exploring. We're exploring options because they don't like what's happening with Morel right now. And then on top of that, this week, you have the Diamondbacks, whose scouts are openly concerned about Drew Jones. And Drew Jones, I believe, is a little bit younger than Morel. I think Morel is in his early 20s, 23, 24. Jones, I believe, is 19 or 20. He's a few years younger. When you're looking at these situations, it's gotta just be your normal run of the mill, this happens kind of stuff, JG. But you're talking about a couple of prospects that I think both Arizona and Chicago thought were going to play a role in the success of their teams in the future. So is this just situations where sometimes you miss on it? Is this situations where, if these players potentially have a new scene, that they could be the prospect we thought they were going to be? Because we know that prospects miss all the time. But generally speaking, in Major League Baseball, when you get the hype that these two guys have gotten, and no one thought they're going to be the greatest players of all time, but if you're the Cubs and you're the Diamondbacks, you've heard these names for a minute now, and now we hear like, oh, maybe they're not. So what do you make of those two names specifically, JG?
Morel's a little different than Jones. Morel's been in the big leagues for a couple of years now. We've seen, and he's gotten an opportunity. So the evaluation process for someone who's been in the big leagues a little, for 2 years, this is his third year playing in the big leagues. It's a little bit different, because you have an idea of what they are. And as you said, for Morel, the evaluations, you have scouts at every game, whether for your own team, and you have scouts that watch your opponents play. And the scouts that are in watching their own team, all they're doing is they sit down in the meeting and go, hey, what is Morel? What's going on with Morel? Can you watch and see a little bit? So they'll spend a week or two and say, all right, we're going to reevaluate what Morel's doing. And the scout's job solely watching Morel play. And in that process of it, they're evaluating, okay, what do we see right now? Well, what we see is he's a 196 hitter right now. Well, why? What did we not understand at what he's doing? That's their question. What do we not understand of what we initially saw from him to what we're seeing today? What's the struggle? What's the problem? What's the issue? What's going on? There's a lot of questions that are being asked about that. For Drew Jones, it's different because he's in the minors still. He's coming up a little bit slower. And the hard part for Drew is that you see guys like Jackson Holliday who have fast-tracked and is then AAA and had an opportunity to be in the big leagues right now. You see others in the last two drafts get called up and are in the big leagues. You have again, Wyatt Langford, who was drafted last year in 2023, he's in the big leagues with the Rangers. Evan Carter, who was in the same draft class as Drew Jones and Jackson Holliday, he's been in the big leagues. You see Hurston Waldrop in 2024 for the Braves. You see Paul Skeens. So you see a lot of these guys who were drafted early in the first round, just like Drew Jones is, be fast-tracked, and they're succeeding and they're moving up and they're playing well. In this fight, I know Jackson has not done well in the big leagues, but he's done well in AAA. There's a difference. Whereas Drew is still in single A right now. So, some guys in that case, they just take more time. I don't know. I don't think there's a issue of, man, we're going to panic now about Drew Jones because he's still in single A after, a year and a half. In being drafted in 2020, in I guess it was 2022. And we're still seeing him in single A right now. There has to be some patience. Because not everybody moves as quickly through the minors. And some guys, again, Drew is going to be one that we had to take more time because he was small. He's 6'4" tall, but he was 170 pounds in high school. And he's still only 180 to 185 pounds right now. He needs more time to mature. He is 19, 20 years old. I think he's more 19 right now still. So the maturity of the body has to continue to grow for him before we go anywhere else. And it's harder. It's hard for him because he's a legacy player. His dad, Andrew Jones from the Braves, and he was in the big leagues at 19, 20 years old and succeeded immediately. So we always know legacy players, that have to follow their fathers are very much harder to go about. Again, Jackson Holliday had his comparison to his father, and sure enough, we see him go for 2 for 36. So patience for Drew, who is going to take a little bit more time. I think that was known, that was understood. And if the Diamondbacks panic, then they're admitting that they misevaluated, and they don't want to do that because that's still going to cost you your job. So patience is needed. For Morel, it's a little bit different because, again, we've gotten 3 years of him in the big leagues. So there is an admittance that, hey, maybe he's not the guy at third base that we thought he was going to be, and we need to reevaluate that position.
JG, Micah Parsons, he's always good for a nice quote. Micah Parsons said that if he played Major League Baseball, he is very confident that he could bat at least 200 over the course of a season. Literally within 24 hours of him saying that, Tyler Glasnow of the Dodgers came out and said if that dude got 500 at bats in Major League Baseball, he would be lucky if he got 5 hits during the course of an entire season, much less batting 200. JG, that this blurs those lines once again and just turns into that conversation of, does just being athletic transfer from sport to sport? And clearly Micah Parsons believes, and there are other football players in the same boat who are athletic physical specimens like Micah, that if you are a good athlete, baseball is easy. You can go to baseball and you can just put the bat on the ball and get on base. Now, Micah's not saying he's going to jack all these home runs or anything crazy like that, but he thinks that he could hit 200 if he played a season in Major League Baseball. So, JG, I turn to you.
I don't know. Did Micah ever play baseball, like in high school or anything like that?
I think he played in high school.
The funny part is, again, athleticism. Again, Micah Parsons, great athlete. I'm not going to take anything away from him as an athlete. He's a great athlete. But didn't we see probably arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time in Michael Jordan try to play professional baseball, and
it wasn't the best.
It didn't look good. Now, there was a lot. I'll say this. I argue this because scouts said if Jordan gave himself 2-3 more years of focusing solely on baseball, he would have made it in the big leagues. He didn't get enough time. So it's one of those things, like there's the gray area in the conversation of it. Athleticism itself is not all it takes to be able to be a baseball player. And we hear comments all the time when I have conversations with people about how great the baseball players, in my opinion, again, it's my opinion, baseball players are the greatest athletes there is. And there's an argument that we made about hockey because of what they do on ice and skates, that the athleticism that they have is tremendous. But for being able to do the things that we do as baseball players and be able to have the hand-eye coordination of hitting a ball that travels 960 feet, less than 0.4 of a second. Now today with 100 and 103 miles an hour pitches, it travels at less than 0.4 of a second. The reaction time is amazing for that level. Be able to move and react as we do. It's the hardest thing. I think it's the hardest thing in the world in sports to be able to achieve. So athleticism itself is not the cause for it. So for Parsons, it is a little short-sighted to say that, if I had 400 or 500 at bats, I'm batting 200. It's not that easy. It's not that simple. Do I believe that if you give a guy, well, that's the same thing that I could say that, hey, we have some great athletes in baseball that you put pads on them, they can go play in the NFL. And every time, if somebody were to say that, we have this conversation about NBA players saying that NBA players can go play in the NFL, or the NFL players can go play in the NBA. But and they were like, well, no, y'all are too soft. Well, here's the problem with that conversation. If I wanted to flip it, it's easier for me to flip it. Baseball players did play football. They did grow up playing football. Some of the best outfielders were defensive backs or wide receivers. A lot of my, for fielding drills that I do for my outfielders, I do defensive back drills because that's what they were accustomed to doing in high school at one point. Or I have guys who played college football that also played college baseball. So the transition of one sport to another, it's easier for baseball players to play football, but the hand-eye coordination and everything for a football player to try to go play and hit a 96 to 100 miles an hour fastball with a curveball that breaks off 8 to 9 inches, that's harder. So I mean, again, I don't know the background of Parsons and what he has from baseball. If he played high school or whatnot, it doesn't necessarily. And I don't know what his stats were in high school if he did play. To say that you're going to jump into the big leagues and say, yeah, I'll hit 200. No, that's not how that works. That is not how that works. Again, in the NFL, you get drafted, you go straight into the NFL. Major League Baseball, you get drafted, you go to minors for 3 years, and you learn how to play Major League Baseball. There's your difference on how you look at it in the two sports. That's why it's harder.
Let's not forget, Tim Tebow tried to do it as well. Tim Tebow tried to do a little Major League Baseball.
There's only 2 players that are the exception to the rule of athleticism, hand-eye coordination that were able to do both, and that was Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders. And then you have, and I won't even say that because you have Brian Jordan he got drafted in the NFL and he played in the Major League Baseball. So you have a handful of guys who've done both at the big leagues and play in the NFL at one point too. There's a couple of others out there that I'm probably not naming, but they're the exception to the rule. As you said, there's guys that try to do both. It didn't work. There's another one. The Brandon Weeden. Brandon Weeden was another one who tried to be a pitcher he was drafted by the pitcher as the Yankees, failed, and goes to place in the NFL. So again, you have guys that try to do it. They can't do it. And again, there's the exceptions to the rule, and that's why they are the exceptions when it comes to how successful they end up being in both sports.
JG, we love having you on here. Thanks for coming on. Have a good morning. All right.
Appreciate it, guys. Y'all as well.
Mo, always a pleasure bringing JG on here in the mornings with us. Mo, let's do this, shall we? Let's pivot back here. Let's get back to the NBA Finals, and let's talk about things from the Dallas Mavericks side. So the second conversation that you always have when you walk away from the finals and you look at the losing team is what can they do to get back and maybe get over the hump and get themselves the chip next season. And that's the question right now with the Dallas Mavericks. Great story, great run in the playoffs. You can talk about matchups. You can talk about being fortunate that they didn't play certain teams. Break it down however you want. But at the same time, it's fair to say they don't have enough on this team right now to compete with Boston if they got there again next year. If we have this matchup next year, I don't think it's going to end up much differently based on the way these two teams are currently comprised. So, Mo, what does Dallas need if they're going to get themselves over the proverbial hump and have enough to make a run if they get there again and they're looking at Boston on the other side?
When I look at their roster, the first thing that comes to my mind is they need a shooter. They need another shooter because when you look at what Luka and Kyrie can do in terms of shot creation for themselves and others, they got open looks, but what they didn't have was consistent shooters. So I think they need a shooter, and I think they do need another shot creator coming off their bench. Somebody that can maybe get you double digits in scoring while running the offense whenever one or the other, Luke or Kyrie, are off the floor, just to balance out what you can do from a production standpoint with that bench. I think if they can add a shooter and another shot creator, then this would be more than just a run. Dallas would be a legitimate title contender next year. I think what they did this season was terrific, and then the additions of Gafford, the additions of Washington, that impacted them greatly on defense more than offense. But I still think right now, with their current roster construction, this was more about a great run versus the start of the Mavericks, owning the West for the next 2 to 3 years. I look at the West right now and I say it's Denver's or Minnesota's to lose right now, right? It comes down to that. And with Denver, it's really about they didn't have the bench they had the year they won the title. So if they go out and get some pieces to give them more production off the bench, I think Denver's right back at the top of the heat.
And then, Mo, let's not forget there's that one little thing where like Dallas just doesn't get free agents.
Yeah.
So it's great to say, Dallas, you got this far, you had a run, you bring in a shooter. We're not talking about a run anymore. We're talking you could be second, third best in the West. But then you look at the fact of the history of the people who have come by will to play in Dallas, and Mo, it doesn't happen. So
I don't know why that is, because Mark Cuban's a great owner, very popular. I don't know why guys don't come to Dallas. That's you can go way back when they had Mark Aguirre and when they had Rolando Blackman. From them to Dirk, guys didn't come. They didn't come during the Dirk era. They didn't come. I think 1 year they tried to get DeAndre Jordan, and I think that was the year that Doc Rivers and the rest of the Clippers went over to his house and they locked the door and wouldn't let the Mavs come in. Or it was something really crazy like that. But other than that, they've never been able to garner a big name free agent. And I'm not sure that's going to change in the Luka era, because as great a player as Luka is, unless you're just out and out a role player, I don't see another star player going like, yeah, I'm gonna sign up for that. He's not an easy guy to play with. Ball dominant guys, there's only one ball dominant guy I've ever seen that's easy to play with. And he might be easy to play with. I don't know if it's easy to deal with, and that's LeBron. But you look at the ball dominant players from Trae Young to James Harden to Luka. There's a ceiling in terms of the success, and then there's a ceiling in terms of who they can bring in. Like right now, we're talking about Luka and Kyrie, Chris. But remember, Kyrie got to Dallas because at one point nobody wanted him, so he got to Dallas by default. Had Kyrie been like still considered who he was and didn't have the baggage, I don't think he lands in Dallas. So I think I look at the Mavs between the two teams, and I think the Celtics are going to be back in the Eastern Conference Finals. Unless they can pull off some moves that I don't foresee, I don't think the Mavs make it back to the Western Conference Finals.
But Mo, I will say this. When Kyrie went to the Mavs, there were a couple, because I saw it, but there were not many. If you were to say they're going to go to the finals with Kyrie on this squad, you were laughed out of the room. Nobody thought that was a finals making move, getting Kyrie on that team. It was what you just said it was. It was they had to dump Kyrie somewhere. And then, of course, Kyrie was going to stay because nobody else wants you. So your time in Dallas wasn't horrible. We said that your offense was decent after you got there. None of y'all played defense. But where else were you going to go, Kyrie? There was no other team that was going to take you and bring you on after what happened to get you into Dallas in the first place. So with his stock at an all-time low, Dallas was like, "Hey, you've been all right. You've been all right here. We'll take you back." And he did it. But Mo, no one thought at the time that was a team that was going to make a run to the finals. That was just he has nowhere else to go. So for me, I looked at the Kyrie to Dallas move, and even if they don't get back, I'm going to call it a success, because I don't think anyone predicted that Kyrie was going to a finals with the Dallas Mavericks.
Absolutely.
So the fact that they got there and Kyrie was he wasn't sitting on the bench, Mo. Kyrie was part of that. He was a big part of their success. So hats off to Kyrie, because
and the Mavs.
Right. Because he was part of the reason they were in that championship conversation this season. And Mo, no one put him there.
No, I'll be honest. At the start of the season, I thought Dallas was one of those teams that would probably make the playoffs, be knocked out in the first round. I did. But I really love the moves they made at the trade deadline, bringing in PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. It literally shifted them into a team that couldn't defend to one of the better defensive teams for the rest of the season and into the playoffs. And it was exciting because they could get stops, but then you had Luka and Kyrie that could create something out of nothing. And like I said, they went on an amazing run. If you would have told me going in, because remember, most people after the Timberwolves took out the Denver Nuggets, had the Timberwolves going to the finals, right? They were already going, well, Anthony Edwards, the face of the league, he's getting ready to be the next Michael Jordan. It was a done deal. And I didn't see that. It's why I picked the Mavs. I don't know why. I just didn't see that. I didn't see that going that way. And it was crazy because Luka's just a different animal, right? I thought Denver was easy for them to match up with because you can find a big man. Big men are hard to find. As great as Jokic is, you know where he's going to be, and you know you can double him to some degree. And I thought Anthony Edwards being able to completely dominate Jamal Murray, something I didn't see coming, but he did that. He shut him down. Luka's a different animal for Jamal Murray. He couldn't do that. Kyrie's a different animal. Jaden McDaniels could not guard Kyrie consistently. So I just thought Dallas was a different animal that Minnesota wasn't equipped to beat. The West really played out, Chris, like it was a matchups thing.
Yep.
If Denver beats the Timberwolves, I guarantee you Denver beats Dallas. And I don't even think that's a good series. But because the Timberwolves took out Denver, things aligned so strangely. Like I think a lot of people in the second round, I think a lot of people had Oklahoma City beating Dallas. And I had Dallas. And people thought I was crazy, but I was going with the fact that I thought Dallas had been there before. Luka had been to a conference final before. Even though Shea's a terrific player and they have a lot of young talent, all this was new for them. And you could tell in late game situations, they just weren't prepared and they weren't ready. They will get better. They'll be back. Look, as a basketball fan, I'm not telling Mavs Nation that Dallas has no shot of making another run. I'm simply saying, look at your team and look at your shortcomings. If you had a drop down shooter, let's say Klay Thompson, even though he's not what he was, but what if you had Klay Thompson on that roster getting those open catch and shoot opportunities? They would have won a couple of those games. This is a better series than most people would have said. I know they lost in 5, but there were a couple of games. Game 2 and Game 3 were right there, and they couldn't find a way to pull it out. But if you have some guys that can benefit and make those shots, somebody that you can count on, like you can't leave this guy alone or he'll make us pay, I think the Mavericks have a shot if they can add somebody like that.
Well, let's talk about that guy because that's how we're going to close the show today is with Klay Thompson. So Klay Thompson's name is very interesting. Obviously, the Warriors are saying out publicly, we want Klay back. We got to keep the guys together. We're going to figure it out. Of course, that's what we expect them to say. And then you have Klay's name attached to all these other teams. His name's attached to Philly. His name's attached to Orlando. He has 3 or 4 other spots where people are like, they could be interested, depending on the number, to bring Klay in. We saw a report yesterday that Klay is going to test the free agent market. It doesn't mean he doesn't want to go back to Golden State, but he definitely kind of sees the writing on the wall of what his role in Golden State is going to be. And he wants to test and see what his market value is. And maybe that's just to go back to the Warriors and be like, listen, this is what I'm worth. If you don't want to pay it, then we're breaking up the band. If you want to pay it, then we'll stay together. We don't really know which way Klay's leaning, except for a report did come out this morning, Mo, that he wants a 3-year deal. Do you see a team giving Klay a 3-year deal?
I do. I can see another contender willing to give him the deal because on another contender, they're literally asking him to be a catch and shoot guy, right? Not carry the load, not even be the second option. So I think that he has a lot of value with a lot of contenders. I don't think Klay Thompson is going to be a Warrior this coming season, because I think if he's allowed to test free agency, get out in those waters, there's going to be a couple of offers that he won't refuse. There's going to be a couple of offers that Golden State won't match. I think Golden State already has a number in mind where they value him at money-wise, and I think they've already told him that, and I think he said, yeah, I'm going to test the waters to see what's out there. I think in a lot of ways he feels slighted or insulted, and I can understand him feeling that way, but realistically, if you're Warriors management, I can't give Klay a big deal based off of services rendered from the past.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like they're already in like purgatory right now. When you look at them, they're a mediocre team. I can't justify giving you a monster contract. We love you, but you're not Klay Thompson from 4 years ago. And I can't give you that kind of money. And I guess he knows that, but I don't think he wants to hear that. And I completely understand that. So I think in the bigger picture, when it's all said and done, I think Klay Thompson is going to be playing for another team. The question is, though, would he go to the East, or would he go to a team like the Mavs with the opportunity to play his old team, right? Like sometimes you want to do that to show people like this is what you're missing. You let this guy go. I think that I'm looking at a team like the Mavs. I think Klay Thompson should be considered for somebody that Oklahoma City would target. Young team that needs a little veteran leadership, a reliable playoff performer, great shooter, and catch and shoot opportunities. I think Klay Thompson will have no shortage of suitors.
And Mo, isn't it almost a situation where it's like Klay can be the sixth man, right? He can be the first guy off the bench, but maybe he just can't do it with the Warriors. Maybe he's built up such a legacy with that franchise, with the people who are still going to be on that team next season. He can't be less with the Warriors, but he can walk in to a Dallas and be like, you guys don't know me. I got nothing built up here. I'm just joining you guys to try to get a title. Whatever you need, I got you. You can do that when you go somewhere else. You can do that when you go to a different company. But when you're with the company you've been with for so many years, and they play the glory days, and you're front and center in those glory days, and then your running mate Steph, he's still front and center, but now you're like fade into the background, and they're trying to bring in people to kind of replace what your role used to be on the team. Like, that's a lot, Mo. That's a lot for someone to handle. That's a lot for someone to take in stride. But you just plop them into a new team, and they're like, listen, we're going to give you this. This is the money you want, but you're going to be like our fifth best option. He has no issue being like, all right, I can do that. That's okay. All right. I'm going to make my money and be okay, you got it. Like, it's a lot easier to digest.
It is different. And so I think you bring up a great point. I've given my whole career. You could say he's given his body. Think of all the surgeries he's gone through when he originally got injured in that finals against the Raptors. And now here I am on the back end of my career. Draymond got a contract. Steph got a contract. They're not what they were. I would argue Steph still is. But they're looking at Klay and they're going, you're right. But here we are. Draymond was never a scorer. And what he gives us, you can't do what he does. He's a unique thing because he's an all-NBA defender. He's also a facilitator, so he does multiple things for us. Whereas Klay's role right now is they want him to be a catch-and-shoot guy, but he wants to be paid almost like he's still at an all-star, all-NBA level, and he's not. But if he went to a team like you said, the Mavs, or he went to a team like, say, Sacramento, who could always use more shooting, or what if some kind of way the Nuggets could do some salary cap gymnastics and they get a Klay Thompson. And on the Nuggets, he fills that role where all he's got to do is catch and shoot. And you're with the opportunity to catch and get clear open shots with Murray and Jokic. Yeah, he wouldn't be a star, but he would be so valuable. And maybe, like you said, in a lesser role, it wouldn't feel like a lesser role because it's not Golden State. He built up so much equity there. The idea that they would come to him and go, Klay, we love you, man, but we're thinking of you being more as a six man. Or we're thinking of you as being more of a complimentary starter where you start the first 5 minutes and then we get you out of there. I'm with you. I think he can take a lesser role anywhere but there. And they're in that purgatory where they're trying to tell him, we want you back, but we also want you in a lesser role. I think he walks because of those reasons, and I don't blame him.
Mo, take us to the end, sir.
Thank you guys for joining us this morning. Make sure you check out all the great content we have at the Wire to Wire Network. Wire to Wire Network, we appreciate you.
Make sure you're back here, same time, same place tomorrow. Will's going to be here to talk NBA as we prepare for the NBA offseason, which is right around the corner. The NFL genius himself will be here to talk a little bit NFL football. We got a story coming out of the Bay Area, Mo, that I think is just going to make you just absolutely hit your head against the wall. Yeah. We will get to that tomorrow. All of that and more. Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show, powered by Wire to Wire.